The insider threat is renowned as one of the weakest links in cybersecurity. I'm here with Shefali Yugendra, Risk and Decision-Making Specialist and Non-Executive Board Director at JP Morgan US Smaller Companies Investment Trust. Shefali, how can you minimise the impact or the risk of the insider threat?
Once again, there are two parts to this. One is, of course, the malicious insider, and the second is an insider who commits a mistake. We cannot plan for malicious insiders. That's an unfortunate part of the reality of life. But for the insider who makes a mistake, there are several components to it. The mistake doesn't happen in isolation. It happens because there is either an absence of checks and balances or one of the checks and balances failed and the individual went ahead and committed a mistake anyway. So the mistakes committed have to be seen in the framework of what checks and balances the organization has, what openness in the culture in terms of communicating, yes, I have raising one's hand and saying, yes, I've made a mistake. How do we actually mitigate those risks once again? And do we punish the person and send a message to people, or do we actually say, okay, you made a mistake, we can contain this? The challenge remains the malicious insider, and that is where, once again, checks and balances can play a role, but if somebody is hell-bent on destroying an organization from inside, there's not a lot we can do.
So there's a balance to be struck, isn't there, between, you mentioned checks and balances, which is obviously crucial in any organisation, but you have to strike that balance between showing sufficient trust to your staff, which in its own way should be motivating to them and should make them behave more like adults because you're treating them like adults, but at the same time making sure that the checks are there. So what's the best practice in terms of where you draw that line between showing sufficient trust and not just leaving it a complete open free-for-all when anyone can do anything?
This is an entire area of management theory of managing people, the theories X and Y. One of them says that employees have to be infantilized and micromanaged, and the other says they're adults who can deal with stuff. Most organizations, depending on what their culture overall is like, as we have discussed before, that the cybersecurity culture is a subset of the risk culture, which is a subset of the overarching culture in the organization. So the overarching culture of the organization determines how we are going to treat our employees and how responsible and connected they feel their contribution to the organization's mission is.
Okay, fantastic. So there's one other question I want to ask on this one, which again comes down to the checks and balances thing, and that's, would you employ a reformed hacker? I mean, obviously, you use a criminal to catch a criminal. Would you employ a reformed hacker to help defend your organisation?
I would, but in an organization's context, of course, these decisions are taken together by the executive team and the board. But as a professional who understands risk, I would definitely employ a reformed hacker, not least because a reformed hacker knows where the weaknesses and vulnerabilities are for an organization and can help potentially protect the organization against them, but also because of my overarching belief that at some point we have to rehab the criminals back into society. Otherwise, they remain a cost to society. So those are the two things I would look at: the organizational concern and the overarching societal concern of rehabbing people.
Fantastic. Well, if you're a reformed hacker, then send your CV into Shefali as soon as you can. Thanks very much.
Thank you.